What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're doing something a little bit different here. I just wanted to spread the word that the Splitgate 2 Open Alpha is now live, and it's only live for this weekend. So I wanted to make sure I was getting this video out. I did initially plan on covering some of the new content for Call of Duty that just came out. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for that, but my baby was up all night sick, and unfortunately I just don't have the time or energy to get that finished. So instead, I just thought I would spread the word on Splitgate 2 since I managed to get in a good handful of games with the alpha so far, and I'm really enjoying myself with it, and I wanted to make sure you guys don't miss out on this. So like I said, the alpha is live just for this weekend. It's available on the current gen consoles as well as on Steam for PC. It is of course 100% free, and also I want to be clear, this is not a sponsored video. I just enjoyed Splitgate 1 and I'm enjoying myself with Splitgate 2 so far, and I want to make sure you guys don't miss out on potentially checking this out if you're interested, because honestly I've actually not been tracking the development of this game at all, and I just recently found out that there was even going to be an alpha in the first place for this weekend, so I'm sure many of you guys were totally unaware. But just in case you guys weren't familiar with Splitgate 1, the basic premise behind this is it's basically Halo meets Portal. That's how it's always been described in the past, and that's still the case with Splitgate 2. So it's an arena-style shooter with very similar gameplay mechanics to Halo, aside from the fact that we have portals. Just like the game Portal, so you can get around the map, and you can make some cool plays to outplay enemies, for instance, with these portals. And that same general premise, of course, holds true with Splitgate 2. However, there are quite a few differences I've noticed so far, and I wanted to highlight at least some of them, keeping in mind this is coming from somebody that hasn't been super involved in keeping up with all of the development of Splitgate 2. Also, while I did play Splitgate 1 quite a bit when it first came out, I haven't touched the game in a couple years now, so I'm going based on my memory to the best of my ability here. They've definitely updated and improved the look and feel of the game, but it does have the same general vibes to it. Another thing I noticed pretty quickly is the map design feels very different from Splitgate 1. There's a lot less verticality than what I remember. That's the big thing I noticed right away. And I also noticed it seems like there are fewer walls that you can put portals on. And I believe that was an intentional decision combined with the fact that they've simplified the portal mechanics. Like, one thing I noticed right away is you can just place your portal over top of an enemy's portal and it will delete theirs and place yours. Whereas from what I remember from Splitgate 1, you had to manually destroy the enemy portal first before you could place your portal there. So you could actually use your portals to just block off certain walls and ensure nobody could come through that area. And as far as I can tell, you can't do that anymore. Additionally, by default, to place portals, they've just got it set to a single button press. So when you try to place a third portal, it just deletes the first one that you placed. Because of course, you can only ever have two portals active at once. Whereas in Splitgate 1, you would manage which portal you were placing, so you'd have a left portal and a right portal, two different colors, and that did allow for more freedom and control with your portals, but it could be a little bit overwhelming and harder to keep up with for beginner players, so they decided to simplify things a little bit. It is worth noting, based on what I've seen in the settings, you can set your controls, so it is like the classic Splitgate 1, where you have control over your left portal and your right portal, but by default, they've just got it to a single button press. And I think that, combined with the simplified map design and the fewer locations that you can place portals on, seems to be a very intentional design decision with Splitgate 2. I think what they're aiming for here is to make the game a bit more accessible and a little easier to get into for newer players, because in Splitgate 1, the skill ceiling with the portals especially got insanely high. And it got to the point where the average player seemed to struggle to understand what was going on anytime they played against a good player. Like, they just had no idea what was happening because good players were just flying all over the place, going through portals, popping up from all these different angles at any given point in time. And I do think, while it was really cool to watch a highly skilled player really take advantage of this super high skill gap and high skill ceiling, it was one of the things that I feel held back the first Splitgate from growing beyond its fairly niche audience. Like, the people that liked it really seemed to love it and stick around with it, but the average casual FPS player out there, I don't think they really stuck around very long with it. So that's why I feel they're trying to simplify in some areas, which will of course reduce that skill gap and that skill ceiling. And I absolutely think this is going to make some diehard Splitgate 1 fans upset. But it's just one of those situations where a balance needs to be found. If you want a game that's going to grow and thrive over time, you have to try to find that balance and make sure the game is accessible so that new players will want to stick around when they come by and check out the game. And I guess time will tell as far as whether or not they've reached this balance with Splitgate 2. But if you are somebody that maybe tried out Splitgate 1 initially and it was too overwhelming for you, it may be worth giving Splitgate 2 a shot. It's a little easier to get into so far based on my experience. Now moving on, another big thing that's changed with Splitgate 2 compared to Splitgate 1 is we now have different factions with their own unique perks and abilities and equipment and even weapons. Now when it comes to the alpha, we have access to 3 factions, And each faction will have a carbine, an assault rifle, a shotgun, a burst rifle, and an SMG. But the stats will be different depending on the faction. So one faction may have a stronger assault rifle than another faction, but maybe a weaker SMG, for instance. I don't know all the stats of the weapons. That's just an assumption that I'm making here. Since they are different guns, they're likely going to have some different pros and cons attached to them. But then on top of that, each faction has a passive ability as well as an active ability. And just an example here with Eros, their passive ability gives a faster ability cooldown for you and your teammates, and then their active ability is called Rush. So when you activate it, you get a faster movement and reload speed, plus a one-time health boost. Whereas for Meridian, your passive is faster health regeneration for you and your teammates, and your ability is called Hypersight, which allows you and your teammates to briefly see enemies through walls. And then finally, I guess we'll just cover the third one here. For Sabrask, their passive is equipment recharges faster for you and your teammates, and their active ability is a smart wall, which is a transparent wall you can place and you can shoot through it, but the enemy team can't. Now, those are the default traits that you'll get for just using that faction. And then each faction on top of that has the ability to edit your loadouts. And with your loadouts, you have multiple perks that you can use. And again, these perks are tied to the faction themselves. And just some examples here, you can reload faster with a perk, your equipment can recharge faster, you can have faster weapon swap, and it looks like you can choose 2 of these perks as well as a piece of equipment, and the equipment is also unique to the factions. So there's definitely a whole lot more depth here compared to the first Splitgate, where we didn't even have factions in the first place. You just picked your gun and that was it. And overall, based on what I'm seeing so far, I like the general idea of this. I like the depth that this adds. I think that was another thing that did hold back Splitgate 1 to a degree, was there was just a lack of depth outside of the gameplay itself. Now, in saying that, obviously there's a concern about the balance between the abilities and having meta characters, and also those abilities coming into play too much within the gameplay. So far from what I've seen, these abilities aren't like you hit 2 buttons and you just instantly kill enemy players or anything. They more so seem to be abilities that just help your intended playstyle. So when I first saw factions, I was actually a bit concerned that we were seeing another hero shooter. But at least in my opinion, based on what I've seen so far, I'm getting less hero shooter vibes and more like class or role-based vibes. So you kind of spec into the playstyle that you want to play, and the factions will just help support that particular playstyle. That's been my experience with it so far. Again, there's probably going to be some pushback against this from the purists that like the simplicity of the gameplay where everybody starts the match on a 100% level playing field with no stat changers or nothing like that that separates them from each other. And it's basically just my aim and my movement and my ability to use portals versus your aim and your movement and your ability to use portals. But again, I see why they're going in this direction. I think that was one of the downsides that prevented people from really getting hooked with Splitgate 1, was there was just a lack of depth outside of the gameplay itself, and the gameplay itself did end up falling flat over time for a lot of people since it was just the same thing game after game. This adds a little bit more variety in there, it mixes things up a little bit, and it allows you to branch out and experiment with different factions and playstyles. And there we go. I guess there's just one last thing that I noticed that's different about Splitgate 2 versus Splitgate 1, and that is the fact that we have sliding in Splitgate 2. Whereas Splitgate 1, there was no sliding at all. Now, in my experience so far, it's not crazy like modern Call of Duty, for instance. It seems more like the type of thing you use for evasion rather than an effective, aggressive gunfighting tool. Like, I don't think you're going to be seeing all kinds of crazy slide cancels in the middle of gunfights or anything. Although, who knows, maybe somebody will figure out how to do that. But so far, based on my initial experience with this at least, it seems they've kept sliding quite reasonable. It's nothing too crazy. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. If you guys are interested in checking out the Splitgate 2 alpha, make sure you get in throughout the weekend because it looks like it's only live until Sunday as far as their website is showing. And with that, I am curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about Splitgate 2 based on what you've played or just seen with gameplay so far? If you're somebody that played Splitgate 1, do you guys think this is a notable upgrade from that or maybe a downgrade in some areas? And is this a game that you're looking forward to once it fully releases? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.